Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me for the 4th time Travis Gibb, who was on about 10 weeks ago, I think. So, welcome back.
Hey, good to be back. Good to be back. Am I top for guests? Am I the most?
You're tied with 3 other people.
Okay, who are my people?
Ruben Romero, Casey Bowker, and Gary J.
Damn, those are a good group of people. Gary is different. We are polar difference.
So 3 of you are comic people, and then 1 of you is a professional wrestler, which is super interesting. And I'm sure Gary's going to be on at some point for a 5th one, because Gary J is just a special individual. But we're not here to talk about wrestling as much as we can talk about wrestling. And I might be talking about wrestling with somebody in about an hour. But I do want to talk about Voodoo Nations and what's going on with that. We got Voodoo Nation issue 1 has been out for a while. It's on Comixology for those who want to pick it up, or you can pick it up with the current Kickstarter going on for issue 2. So what is Voodoo Nations, briefly, before we get into it?
Sure, yeah. I'll even show this movie. I got a 9.9, as you know, as a comic. That's really hard to get, so I'm super proud of it. And have I ever showed you this? I know you're a pop guy. Have I ever showed you this?
I don't know if you showed me the pops on this one. I know that you were getting that, but I don't know if you showed.
Yeah, look at that. My wife got me this. This is the guy who creates pops for Bruno Mars and a whole bunch of celebrities. He's like the celebrity pop maker. And it looks really good, really legit. Huh? It's really cool.
Oh, that's cool. That's fun.
So this is Bishop Lucas. Bishop Lucas is a badass voodoo priest who controls a small area of Brazil. And a flood happened in this area, and this is a real flood that happened. I used real references to play all this out. He went there the missionaries came to help out, to help heal the area, because they had like 400 and something deaths. It was really, really crazy. But while the missionaries were there, one of them got murdered, and Bishop Lucas brought him back. So it's about missionaries who go to Brazil and they get involved with voodoo. And they think that after issue 1 that everything is over and done with. So spoilers for those. I'm sorry I'm so late into the spoilers. But so they get away, and they're now visiting New Orleans, and they realize that the voodoo is not just in Brazil. It's everywhere, and it's following them. So we kind of explore what the voodoo priest of New Orleans looks like. So we visit the deep catacombs of New Orleans, and we have a new prettier. We have Maria. I'll show you Maria. We have Maria who's joined up, and she's a voodoo priest out in that area, and kind of feeling what it's like to be in New Orleans with voodoo. And as anybody who's American knows that voodoo and New Orleans kind of go together, right? Disney's done it. Everyone's kind of done it.
And so to dive into this a little bit, because obviously you are a Christian. Obviously, I think it's Luke Stone, right? I got that. I should know this by now, right?
Yeah. Luke Stone is also he's a pastor out in Jacksonville. He runs a small congregation.
And so obviously Luke does hybrids for those who don't know. And obviously both of you guys are Christian, and obviously we're dealing with Christian missionaries in Brazil. And this book definitely dives into that. I do want to talk about issue 1, where basically we have Brett and his wife, and RJ is his wife, and then they're doing all this good, and they realize they need to help people, and they are very accommodating to what's going on in Brazil, and they're also meeting people where they are. And so what is that like, to really be respectful to Christianity? Because a lot of times with comics now and in our society, many books are very disrespectful and don't even hit upon the accuracies of religion, and you also hit upon accuracies of voodoo and elements of that. I know that we spoke about this before as well. And so what is that like? Because it is super important.
So, especially in the first book, it's super important. In the first book, it is heavy religious. It's a heavy religious set. If you are a religious man, a religious person, not man or woman, who dives into it, you're gonna feel the religious overtones and that. But we wanted it real. So we used real scenarios, and I use real spirits when it comes to voodoo. Voodoo is actually called Voodoo, and it's a religion that it's all over the place, and each one does it different. And they have different spirits compared to the area that you're in. So a Brazil spirit may not be the same as one in New Orleans or in Mexico, because the spirits kind of embody what the area is about. So involving those two cultures in it has been really tough. But I wanted to keep into real Christianity. So in a Christian book, you'll see the superhero. Let's go a superhero Christian. You see the big cross on his chest, and he's fighting all these things. He never loses his faith. That's what it's about. He is gonna go balls to the wall. In issue 2, we barely bring up faith. We go from issue 1 being heavily faith, and issue 2 not so much. And the reason why is something traumatic happened to their family. And everyone's been there, right? Where you have a grandmother who died, or an aunt, and if you're a Christian, you forsake Christianity because you are mad, you're angry, and you're trying to figure it out. And I wanted to be true to these characters. Even though they're missionaries, people stumble on faith. When you look at these things, and we talk about Christianity, they are held to, if you don't hold this standard, this bar, you're not a Christian. And that's just not true. That doesn't work that way. So I really wanted to play real life. So in issue 2, you don't see a lot of the religious overtones because they're having a crisis of faith. They are struggling with what they believe, and they're putting new things into what that looks like, and what that kind of melting pot of their paradigm has to shift to what's real and what's not.
And to even go further, because also these characters didn't start out as quote unquote good Christians or missionaries. They started out in a very, I don't want to say broken way, because they were very much, I guess, more recreational drug use. And then they sort of met at a hard rock thing, and then they went straight edge, and then they became missionaries. And then it's the entire thing of what happens with one of these characters that forces RJ almost to renounce her faith to some degree. And obviously, I don't think I'm going to ruin some stuff. Basically, Brett gets killed, and Bishop Lucas brings him back, as you stated, and she sort of forsakens her faith, and she also makes a sacrifice, which is this idea that Bishop Lucas says, I'll bring him back, but you have to leave.
Right.
And it's leaving of the help as well. And we could go completely religious of sacrifice, and what are you willing to sacrifice to resurrect the dead? And I mean, you can interpret this as a whole religion thing, and dealing with Christianity and what the Bible goes through. And I tend to be an atheist, and I picked up on that.
Yeah.
So obviously that's a very interesting scenario, because this all happens between Ash Wednesday and then Easter as well, which is a very nice touch that you threw in there. And from my understanding of Christianity, Jesus comes back on Easter, right?
Correct. Yeah. Ash Wednesday, is a sacrament. And then 3 days later, he comes back in resurrection, and there's a resurrection. And you can clearly tell, that clearly Bishop Lucas knows this, and almost is antagonizing them and really challenging their faith. And, in the end of the book, they failed. Right? They failed on that. RJ failed on that, and she renounced. And both of these missionaries walk away from the faith and walk away from their whole mission. They abandoned their people that they went to Brazil, to pursue things other places.
And so it's super interesting just on that. And obviously, we don't know much about Bishop Lucas throughout the first issue.
Right.
And we just know that he is a very antagonistic individual. Obviously, he knows what's going on. He has his own agenda, for lack of a better word. And what he's trying to do is get rid of these people. And people are obviously following him because of this event that happened. And I think the event happened, and partially because of the flood, but also what wound up happening with that flood is that a bunch of mining minerals were dumped in, and there's like a bunch of toxic waste. So it wasn't just a natural flood. It was a natural, basically, I guess, dirty water type of flood. There's a saying called the dirty bomb.
Yeah.
And that's what this essentially was, where a dirty bomb, for those that don't know, is when you pretty much drop something that then has a bunch of other things in it, like chemical waste, which pollutes the land. And that's a lot of people going to Bishop Lucas and following him because he's helping them, much like these missionaries are, but he's almost one of these people that's helping them versus a foreign aid helping them. And so obviously, what is that like building him out? Because he is such an interesting character, a manipulative character, and a lot of shit's going on. And I'm trying to avoid certain things.
No, absolutely. Well, one of the things to point out in issue 1, too, he doesn't actually do anything evil. He's antagonistic, but he doesn't actually do anything. He doesn't murder anybody. In fact, he brings someone back to the dead. He doesn't do anything evil. He's just kind of there. He's antagonistic, yeah, absolutely, but he's helping the people. Yeah, it's an interesting tale. I am so proud of issue 1. Not that I'm not proud of the whole series, but issue 1, I feel like it paced really well. I feel like the base went really well, and I feel that the Ash Wednesday and then putting it in Brazil near the Christ Redeemer statue, using those covers, using that imagery, it's really doing what comics do best. Far too many comics just want to tell their story, but is this the best story for comics, right? So I have key moments that are really good when you put the ash on Bishop Lucas's forehead, and you get to see that cross and what that looks like on the white voodoo priest. When you see him on Christ the Redeemer, those are very visual shots, right? If we were seeing that in a movie, that would be the pause scene for just a second before they go, or in Zack Snyder, the slow motion scenes, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing about this book that's different than Broke Down in a lot of ways, is that this has almost more of a shock feel to it. And also, I think you said it very well, where he doesn't do anything bad in issue 1, but he's bad. If that makes any sense. Like, he's the bad guy.
Right.
There's no mistaking yet. You don't know why he's the bad guy. And I mean, the only bad thing he sort of does, and it's implied, is that he manipulated somebody to kill somebody. I mean, that's
it's implied, though. It's not.
it's implied, but it's a safe gamble to take.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. But
but even still, it's the idea like you can't prove it, but he did it type of thing.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I like that, but I also like the fact that he's very curious about what they're doing there. He comes in a bit hostile, but he doesn't cross the line. He's just sort of like a thorn in their side. And it's very interesting. And even that dialogue and what he's doing, but yet again, he's also likable at the same time in a lot of ways too. And so what is that like really getting his character? Because I don't know who's reading Voodoo Nations for Brett and RJ. I'm reading for Bishop Lucas and what the fuck he's going to do next.
Yeah, and that's been really hard for me, to be honest. So when I did Broke Down, Randy and Denver are the focus, right?
Yeah, I'm reading for Randy and Denver and Mr. Washington and all these characters and how they're all going to interact with each other.
Right.
I'm not reading Voodoo for anybody but Bishop Lucas and what he's gonna do and how far is he gonna go and why is he doing it. That's the focus for me. And it's weird because he's the bad guy.
Sure.
In it. And it's kind of like, what if we're reading a comic from the bad guy perspective?
Yeah, it was super hard to write issue 2 because Bishop Lucas resonated with so many people. The bad guy really resonated. And maybe it's because, when you go to like a Randy and Denver, Randy has very witty dialogue. Denver has a very witty dialogue, and they have this dichotomy where they're fighting each other. Where RJ and Brent, they're not like that. They're, RJ's very in her head. We read everything from her. She's telling the story to you in like a note of some sort. So we know her very well, but we don't even really know Brent very well. We know that he cares about people. He spends that extra time. We know he can translate. So when I did issue 2 and I went to New Orleans, I'm not bringing Bishop Lucas. I found myself thinking about people like you who are like, they love Bishop Lucas. I need to have as much Bishop Lucas in here, even though he's not in New Orleans, because that's what the fans are going to want. Like, if there's no Bishop Lucas, they're not reading issue 3. So we found some unique ways to put him in, not only to show that he's in her head, but like to show kind of his motive a little bit more, kind of revealing behind the curtain. When I did the first draft of it, I had a dream sequence in the beginning, and this is on the Kickstarter, so not really spoiling anything. Had the dream sequence with Bishop Lucas, and then a couple of mentions, but I didn't really show him that much. And I realized that he needs to be there more. Even these new cool voodoo priests, people want Bishop Lucas. They want to know what he's doing. They want to know what's going on, but I don't want to flash back to Brazil and show you what's going on. I want that to be in issue 4. I want us to go back and see what happens when these people who abandon their faith, what that looks like. And
even to tail that, because I do want to talk about that for a second.
Yeah, let's do it.
But one of the things that's also going on right now is that a lot of people really are wanting to go back to isolationism in America in particular. And I don't want to get too political with that, but I think it's a big movement that's occurring in our politics right now. And I also think that's sort of why you're rooting for Bishop Lucas in some ways, because I don't think he wants to necessarily kill Brent and RJ. He just wants them to leave and leave his country alone that he's in. And that's what makes his character so interesting, is that if Brett and RJ just left, the second they met him, I don't think he would have pursued them in any way. I think, and that's what makes it very interesting. And he doesn't want all these minings and things like that. And so it's a very interesting character when you have that. And then now everything sort of broke out of that. And so that's something that I think is also resonating. And it also shows that you're on topic, because I think that's a big sentiment across the world right now, where people don't want, any government in their country. And it's not just a U.S. thing. People don't want China in their country or Russia in their country. And we're starting to see movements to get that out. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
Yeah. It's, the story as a whole came to me, as watching these missionaries. I went a little bit out into the missionary field.
It's also, sorry to interrupt, it's also this idea that raises the question, are missionaries really doing a good thing in these countries? I get at this book as well. And that's an open debate. And it's not meant to be a targeted debate when I ask this question, because I know you're a Christian, but it is a legitimate question that's going on right now. Are missionaries doing the right thing in these countries? Do they want Christianity there?
Well, let's think about it. Let's ignore the issue at hand, but think about the way missionaries are done today in 2021 versus just 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, you went in front of your church and you said, hey, I want to be a missionary. I feel called to Mexico, right? Or you join an organization and they would figure it out. And then you'd raise funds through your church to do that. But now we have Kickstarter, we have GoFundMes, we have all these things. So if Andrew wants to be a missionary tomorrow, he literally can start a GoFundMe, say where he wants to go, and maybe dupe people or get people. We don't know Andrew's background. We don't know what kind of faith he has or any of that. We have whatever he wrote in that message. And I think that that's fascinating. And I think we see more and more of that in the Christian faith, of people who are going out unprepared. And then we see the problems of that, of bad missionaries and what that causes, and what that looks like. Because one of the things that I had no problem doing is sharing some negative light on the Christianity.
Yeah, and I think that's something that this book definitely brings up, because that's something that I think is very interesting, because we do get this shamanistic voodoo, and I don't know exactly what the correct terminology for voodoo religion is, but and I'm sure you're going to correct me in a second or let everybody know, but we get those things coming into conflict. And I think there is some relevance that, while we don't see it in issue 1, we're going to start seeing it in issue 2 and issue 3 and issue 4. And I think there's some fair criticisms against Christianity, but then there's some fair points Christianity makes against this voodooistic,
Right.
religion. And I think it's a very interesting discussion. And it is a tricky line, and it is a dangerous line sometimes to walk on that. And what is that like for you to say, hey, I'm a little bit taking a risk here because this could be interpreted in a very negative way. It could be interpreted in an offensive way. But also, if it hits the correct way and I write it the correct way, it's obviously going to bring light onto a topic. And I think you're taking a lot of caution in writing it, and you're not just throwing it to the wind and writing it, flip-flopping and flimsy. But that's something that I think has to, be spoken about because you're doing a good job, I think, writing it. But it is tricky to write like that.
It's very hard. So I got a call when I launched the Voodoo Nations One from a couple of creators in the Black community.
And I think we spoke about this before.
Yeah. Because the Haitian community really, really protects it. And in fact, that's why I didn't use any Haitian voodoo priests on purpose, because I want that culture has a lot to it, and I'm not here to offend. I'm here to tell a story. And it was also important to me as we go, and I'm not going to reveal who's good and who's bad. There are good voodoo priests that we're going to come across. And I think that that's important too, because in all religions, there is good people and bad. And also, with that being said, I'm also going to show bad Christians. I'm going to show Christians who are actually bad in this, because there is sin in this world, right? Regardless of your atheist or whatever, sin is a thing that happens. And if you take too much of that sin, it may not be a mystical thing for certain people, you become bad, right? If you think that things are okay, like drugs are okay, and you indulge in these drugs or indulge in these women, you become wrong at some point. And at some point you may not be fixable, right? Or to be fixed, it takes a lot of energy. I think that that's a universal truth, regardless of faith, is that there is sin, and indulging in that sin can cause problems. Anything in excess is bad.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that that's something that I want to bring up because whenever somebody says, "Here's a book, Voodoo Nation," I mean, obviously it's a loaded title. It's a catchy title at that too, but it is this thing, and I think it's super important that you're taking a lot of precautions writing it, and I do want to highlight that because it is something that I think the story is great. Amanda Rachels wrote a book about how there's certain colored skins in Africa with people, and they're actually hunted down because these religions think that it's going to grant like them immortality, and it's right. I mean it's crazy, and I mean I don't want to be insulting, but that story is a very important story because it actually is a massively educational story. But there are things like that out there, and that is in that voodoo thing, and I don't think enough people are speaking about this type of story that's out there. I think it sheds a lot of light on a lot of things.
Yeah. I think it is, and I think it's really telling that it's an important story. I don't know if you know that we got Projects We Love. So Kickstarter has awarded with the Projects We Love, and I think that that's a huge thing, right? I'm all about adding stuff, but we're white guys writing about voodoo. I'll be honest, that's what we are, and I think it's really cool that we're taking the subject matter in a certain way that people are seeing that we're respecting that, and even Kickstarter is acknowledging that, and I think that's really cool. I think it's a cool thing. I think it's what makes our story unique. I mean, we're almost funded. We're like $154 from funding, so we're doing great.
And so now I actually want to get a little bit into issue 2 and get back to what you were saying, because obviously you moved the story out of Brazil into New Orleans.
Yeah.
And New Orleans is a crazy fucking place. By definition, there's everything under the sun in New Orleans, and then some. Obviously a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, a lot of partying, a lot of events take place. There's a lot of capitals. The bars never close in New Orleans, and so obviously, what prompted you to bring the story from Brazil to New Orleans, and then on top of that, it's a big change scene. It's a big venue change as well. And that's a big move, to go do that. And it also changes the dynamic of the story. And it's sort of a writing. It can be a writer's headache, and it also has to make sense why you're moving there.
Yeah. For me, I wanted a world trekking adventure, so that was part of it. But the second major and more important is I wanted to get a little personal. So my mother died, and my mom was in AA. My mom went into AA when I was like 13, and she quit drinking. But I was not dealing with my mom dying really well. And for her birthday, me and my brother and my wife and some friends went to New Orleans. And I remember drinking heavily because I was sad about my mom, who would not be okay with me drinking because she's in AA, and the idiocies of that, right? Like what that looks like. How am I rationalizing this in my head? And it was just grief, right? It was just grief, me trying to process all this stuff. And I remember my wife grieving with us, and trying to figure out, but I know I wasn't there. That's why I actually asked my wife to marry me, was there. So it was really important for me to tell this part of the story there, because we have Brent back to life and he's not okay. I think it's fair to say coming back from the dead from a voodoo priest is, you're not going to be okay. And we're dealing with that. And we know something happened because RJ spoils that at the end of issue 1. She says at the end of issue 1 that she wishes he stayed dead. So things get bad. And I wanted to kind of show that because New Orleans has that vibe. New Orleans is the first place I went without a shutoff time for beer. And I didn't think I needed that. I didn't think I needed control, someone to tell me when to stop. I'm an adult, but I did. I didn't realize that I needed that until it wasn't there. That safety net was gone. And you see people on the streets who literally just came there for no reason, who've come there and visited. And it's just crazy. So I really wanted to tell this story. It gets a little bit personal. It's probably not it's probably the most intimate story I've told, because there's real emotions in my writing here, because it's me telling the story of me losing it from the Brent perspective, and then what I felt my wife was going through as I'm losing it, and her going, where's my husband? Because he's not here right now, right? He's not.
Because definitely Brett's humanity gets fucked up and
right.
messed around, and it becomes very, very interesting what's about to happen to him, because obviously you die, then somebody who is not Christianity brings you back in a Christian way to some degree, but also you've been dead for 3 or 4 days,
right?
5 days, and that's got to mess with your head. And then all of a sudden there's some other stuff going on, and it's kind of like, okay, what did we just open up? What did we just do? And they're playing God in a lot of ways also in that regard. And so there's a lot of questions I would imagine that somebody would have. And then now you're in a place that basically can numb your pain in a lot of ways. And it's interesting. And then obviously there's a lot of voodoo other shit going on in that, and there's a lot of tarot reading and a variety of other things that happen in New Orleans that don't happen in other places that are the capital. So obviously that's in play. And so obviously there's just a lot of moving parts can be put into play.
And voodoo in New Orleans was created by, Mama Maria, I can't think of her last name. I'm saying LeBeau, but I don't think that's right. She really she was a voodoo queen of New Orleans. They have memorials, her grave and stuff, but what made her special was that she would mix Christianity in with voodoo. She would not get rid of anybody's faith. She would just mix it into her practices, which really resonated with the people there, because she was told to have real witchcraft powers, and people from all around came to her, and she would mix the Christian faith in with her voodoo practices. And she was the first woman to do that, right? It was a separate religion that was at war. And if you go to any other place, Christians, throw in voodoo, but voodoo actually has embraced Christianity. Most of them, they take these missionaries' words and they're like, all right, cool, that's part of our religion. They don't dismiss it, unlike the Christian faith, which is like, no, your stuff is wrong, ours is right. But voodoo doesn't do that. Voodoo, they're like, okay, cool, you're right, that's fine. Jesus is just another spirit, and let's move on and let's keep doing it. So playing with that and what that looks like in that faith is really interesting. And that's one of the fun parts of writing this book is even though I'm doing voodoo, the way magic works, I made some rules up, but in the actual religions, every area is so different and so drastic in their practices. Like you said, tarot is an active part of voodoo in New Orleans, but would be shunned in any other world, in any other place.
And so obviously, we have Brazilian voodoo in there, and then we come to New Orleans, and then that gets in there, and then New Orleans has a whole history with it. And so what is that research component like? Because obviously you're very respectful to Christianity in this book, and you're also very respectful to voodoo as well. And so what is that like as a research component? Because obviously there's a million different sections, and if you go too far into research, I would imagine you can go down a rabbit hole that you can't get out of, because it gets complicated sometimes, especially when like there's 10 sects and then they all sort of go against each other a little bit, depending on what you're researching.
Yeah, it's super hard because you're looking for something that is very personal. Voodoo is a very personal religion. So studying it is very hard because it's really you and the priestess and what your problem is, kind of addressing that and what spirit would come up with that. And I had to set up rules for the way this works. One of the cusp of the idea is that what if voodoo was organized? And that's one of the things we do. So voodoo in this world, though it's not really tied into like issue 3 or 4, we'll go into it a little bit, is organized. So there's an organized structure in voodoo, and what does that look like, and how does it look like when they add that organization? And what about people who don't, like in a non-denomination faction, what do they think versus stuff? So that's been fun. But you're right, it's really hard to do that. And even the band that's in issue 1, Sleeping Giants, that's a friend of mine's real Christian rock band. I wanted to put real Christian stuff in, and real voodoo stuff. So if you did your research, you can find out these things and get involved if you felt so inclined. So that's really hard when I'm like, hey, I'm doing messed up shit, but you got to just trust me. You got to trust me that it's got to turn out okay.
And obviously there's a lot of stuff that happens in issue 2. We sort of get where RJ and Brent are going, and they're going in different positions. And obviously there's a lot of other stuff, and I don't want to ruin too much of it because there's just, without going too much into it, I don't want to ruin anything for people, because once we start going down that rabbit hole, it's like Broke Down 4. If you haven't read Broke Down 4, you can't read Broke Downs 1, 2, and 3 and enjoy it the same way. That's how it is. So I don't want to go too much into it, but there's a bunch of stuff that winds up happening, and there's not as much Bishop Lucas in there. And so obviously it's going to be very interesting what's going on with all of that and how he's put into that book. And obviously, we sort of talked about it, but it's probably very interesting for you to have that reaction of that character.
Yeah, I've never had to do that before. It's kind of like working at Marvel and DC, right? Or I assume, right? They, they create a character that's, we just want this character to move the plot forward. And then they're like, no, that's our dude. We want that guy. Oh, okay.
I don't know if you know Iceman, what happened with Sin and Grace and Iceman with Marvel.
Like the sexuality thing?
So what happened is that Sin and Grace is a gay Muslim comic writer and artist, and he made Iceman gay. Now, Iceman as a comic wasn't selling very well, it was actually doing not too good, and they actually sort of were on the verge of canceling it, or they might have canceled it. But then the graphic novel sales came in, and the graphic novel sales were far beyond the expectations of it. And they realized that, oh, this graphic novel sales like exceeded what the comic sales were doing, which meant that people weren't interested in the single issues. They were interested in the story in that graphic novel format, and then they almost had to uncancel it. It's a very weird scenario, and it's that kind of situation where a character was very much influential, and they had to backtrack, and they had to almost change course. And it's a crazy circumstance in comics, and it happens very, very rarely. And it's not.
I mean, Spider-Gwen's a good example. You know,
That too.
Edge of Spider-Man. You know, they did the Spider-Verse. They had a really good idea. It was a one-shot, and then this character's like, where can we get more Spider-Gwen? What's that all about? And then they put her on covers, and people went like nuts. Like, where you going? Or Gwenpool's even worse. Gwenpool wasn't even a character. It was just a concept that was thrown on a cover. And they're like, no, we need to create, books and lines. Punchline's the same thing. Can you imagine a character having a one-shot so soon after the introduction? Like, those things don't happen. And Bishop Lucas is like my small version of that, where people are like, dude, like, screw RJ and Brett. Like, let's stay in Brazil. Let's see what this dude does. Like, and I could probably write a whole, story about that.
And obviously there's some other stuff. We're going to deal with the Kickstarter and what's going on with issue 2 and all that stuff, because there's also the backup Chibi Bishop Lucas,
right,
which I would much prefer that story, because that thing is just funny.
There is a 2-page Bishop Lucas, backup.
And it's like Chibi Bishop Lucas. It's pretty funny. So what was that like? Because I'm not going to lie, that just thing made me laugh.
Oh, those are fun. One of the things that I want to do, I won't say that. I recently sat with the Scout booth over a con over the weekend, and one of the things I realized, even though I'm not in Scout or published Scout guy, they see me as an equal. Like, they want me to break bread with them. They want me to sit at their table. And that was a big, wide open thing for me, trying to figure that out. And then I look at my numbers, last broke down got 276. This Voodoo Nations one was 278 backers. Those aren't small numbers, my tickets, I'm not hitting the $10,000 mark on my single issues, but that's because I don't charge shipping. Like when people look at Kickstarters, they think you didn't hit this. Yeah, but if I charge your same $5 shipping, I'm going to be at your numbers. You charge something that I don't, because I want more fans. So I'm building a strong fan base. And with that, I want to take responsibility for the community. So I like to give 2 pages to various people. Like in the back of issue 4, I let someone write a 4-page backup. For Voodoo 2, we gave someone a 2-page backup, and we'll do the same thing for issue 3. I think that that's really important moving forward, to try to create these wonderful opportunities for people. It's only 2 pages, but it gets their name in a book that more people are going to read. So when they do a Kickstarter, it may help them, just get a little bit further, or a few more fans.
Yeah, and I think Kickstarter, I'm going to talk about this because it's getting very interesting, and I have some issues with a bunch of Kickstarters, and I'm very happy with a bunch of other Kickstarters, because obviously I think, the saying is that you have to be the most expensive, the least expensive, or the most valuable. And it's a great saying, and it's so true in so many ways. But before we get into that, I do want to talk about a bunch of rewards, because I know that you got the digital stuff. You got a digital issue 2. I think you have a digital catch-up. You have a digital, plus extras. You got an Orange Cone digital bundle. And obviously we've spoke about digital, so I'm just going to skip all that. And there's just a bunch of other stuff going on. So obviously I want to just show the cover. So this is, I believe, the standard cover.
Yeah, so that's the standard cover of issue 1. That's her sitting on her throne.
And so that's what's going on with
that's the $12 tier. You get it. That's $12 shipped right out to you.
And then this is the nighttime.
Correct.
I guess cover B, right?
That's actually, I think it's cover C. I think you got them backwards.
So this is cover C, and that's then the 110, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is cover B, and that's the daytime.
Correct. And those go together, kind of a day and night variant. We did that on issue 1 where we had him on the Jesus the Redeemer with the light shining, and then in the day.
And so obviously one of those is rarer than the other. And so obviously for those who don't know of anything about comic variants, it's the equivalent of essentially the regular cover is the regular cover. Then you have a variant, which is, I think this one is the 1 in 5, right?
Correct. Yep. And then the other one's 1 in 10.
And then this is a 1 in 10. And so obviously the 1 in 10 for every 10 regular covers that are printed, there is one of those printed, give or take, sort of type of thing. Correct?
Correct. Yep. That's exactly the way it works.
And so I just want to let people know. And so what is cover B going for and cover C?
So B, let me look. B is $16. And then C, so you can only get C if you get B, and that's a $25 for the pair.
And so that's out there. And then we have this cover, which is, I think this is a 1 in 50, right?
1 in 50, yeah, that's Michael Watson. As you know, Bishop Lucas is the dude. And if you are a Bishop Lucas fan, you need that cover. I mean, that cover is just smiling with awesome evil.
And then there's another cover, but that cover is really not up on the Kickstarter. I think it's a Virgin. It's super limited. And obviously,
yeah, there's another cover. It's on the Kickstarter, but we don't have a big picture of it on the Kickstarter. We have just the small picture. And yeah, that's a black and white charcoal pencil cover by Dominic Perez, and that one doesn't have actually any of our characters on it. It has just a voodoo vibe, kind of a New Orleans vibe to it. It does, tie in with a spirit that's in the book, but you have to read the book. That's kind of a spoiler, but he did a cover for that for issue 1 that was really, really a hit. It was a store only, but people from all over the place tried to get that cover. So we had him added to the main roster for issue 2.
And so what is that like? Because I'm a variant guy, and obviously everybody knows who I am. I sell on eBay. I collect variants. I'm very active in that front with a lot of different companies, whether that's DC, Marvel, Zenescope, Image, super exclusive Comic Mint. There's a bunch of stores that I buy variants from, and very exclusive variants. And sometimes I pay a lot of money for a variant.
Right.
Having a 1 in 5, 1 in 10, 1 in 50, 1 in 100 type variant, I mean, obviously, what is that like? Because that's where I think the market is going in a lot of ways. And Kickstarter has always been like that, but I feel like it's becoming more like that as of lately. And obviously, it gives an incentive for people to want to go pick stuff up because, well, if something is more limited, obviously, it's harder to find. It makes people feel like they're getting more value. And then, obviously, at some point, people buy and sell comics as well.
Yeah. So in the last run, when we did Voodoo Nations 1, we had 5 store variants. Several stores had Virgin copies, so the main and the Virgin. So it ended up being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 extra covers that were on the Kickstarter. So we had 6 on the Kickstarter and 9 extra. And we realized that people really dig the voodoo vibe and hunted these down. So what we decided to do, instead of forcing people to hunt down a lot, we are going to do a couple store exclusive, but we're going to keep those a lot rare. We're not going to have that as much. It's a higher pledge level to get that. But we did want to make that rare really hard to get. So we put it only in the collector's kit. So you've got to spend at least, I think it's like $40 is the minimum you have to spend.
And then obviously for those who don't know, you do a bunch of cool different collector type vibes.
Oh, I'm sorry, 60 is the minimum to get that cover. 60 is the minimum to get that cover.
So you have a collector's kit. You have a collector's kit catch-up edition as well, I think. And then you also have the Bishop Lucas Voodoo box. And I don't know if all that stuff is just Voodoo Nation. There's a lot of other things. Orange Cone exclusive stuff might also be involved in some of this. And obviously, you put a lot of stuff because you have a lot of variants beyond Voodoo Nation. You have broke down stuff. You have parallels, I want to say, as well. Obviously, Cthulhu Invades Oz, which is becoming, harder and harder to find in a physical copy of that. It's easy to find digitally. It's always going to be available digitally as it sits right now, unless I'm wrong on that. But
to be honest, Cthulhu Invades Oz, just to give you an idea, there is 26 hardcovers left. That's it. So if you didn't get a hardcover, they're really hard to get. I have 26 in my closet. And then a couple of the creators have an extra one or two, but not anything to shake a stick at, right? They're not going to be cornering the market and selling them. But no, when you get the Bishop Voodoo box, it's actually 2 random store exclusives. Those are Voodoo Nations. Like I said, we did 9 different ones from various stores. So it is Voodoo Nations. We have actually a couple store exclusives already signed on for issue 2. We have 2 already. So you could get either issue 1 or an issue 2 in that Voodoo box. But that's the only way you're going to get them. And I don't, because I'm not in Diamond, and I don't have a group, and I probably should. I should probably have you run it, Andrew. I should probably have you run the Orange Cone group. I think you'd be great at it, and to hunt down all these variants because, when I do store exclusives, it's hard to even know that I have them, right? Unless you're in the know. So we're going to get that, and I make them super rare. So when I do store exclusives, most of the time it's like 25. We keep it super, super tight because I want it to feel special for them and very, 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 very limited.
And even to go further off of that, because I'm on the other side of this trade. If a store is going to pick something up, obviously the store is going to take a risk on indie. There needs to be a bit of an upside for them too. And so obviously a store, if a store is ordering, Voodoo Nation and they're saying, hey, I'm willing to take that risk as far as putting an indie book into my comic shop, and they have a variant, because the whole point of variants is that it helps to reduce costs if a book doesn't sell. Right. So if you have 10 books and there's a 1 in 10, and then you're selling that 1 in 10 for $10, it might cover the cost of 2 books, or it might allow that shop to make an extra $10 on that book, which helps them to do it and cover their costs for taking a risk. And so obviously, that's kind of the deal. And it also rewards shops when they have that and say, hey, I'm going to sell this book where Voodoo Nations might be a $10 book in a store or a $12 book. I'm selling this book for $20 in my store. It's a 1 in 50 because it helps me take the risk and it wets my beak a little bit more. And it's important because when you're in a comic shop, somebody's picking up Batman, they might be like, oh, Voodoo Nations, what's that? And it gets you a different type of fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And even more so, that's, if you're in the know. So there's one on eBay right now. My main issue signed is 6360, just to give you an idea online. But there's one exclusive from Space Cadets. So let me tell you how rare this is. So when I shipped them, they all came damaged but like 10. And then I reshipped them a brand new cover. So they have exclusives, and they're so exclusive, I don't even have them. Like I have 0 copies of this. And there's a couple of them left on eBay for $20. But those are really, really rare because there was only like 10 to 15 that they could actually use.
It's Canto, right? Canto issue 1?
Yeah.
Canto issue 1 is extremely rare. Do you know why it's extremely rare in a 9.8?
Because the whole shipment got damaged, right? If I remember correctly.
There's less than 1/3 that are 9.8 qualified, and even out of those books that are qualified, there's even less than that. So when you have an 8,000 print run and less than 1/3 of them can become a 9.8, that means that those books go for good money, and that's what happens sometimes. And it's not the other books. If you get an 8.5 on a Canto, it's an expensive book regardless. Or if you get a 9.2, it's a nice book. But if you have a 9.8, that book is a $600-800 book, just like that.
Right.
And so it's super interesting in that regard. And obviously people also like in-store stuff. They like exclusive stuff. And so this is what I kind of wanted to talk about because I find that that's the way of the future with Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's going to be important. And especially what's great about Kickstarter is you're investing in the future. Andrew's a research guy. He researches his stuff. Like, I come to him when I have a question about pops if I need one and how to get it or whether or not I should wait. I remember we had a good conversation about a Magneto pop, and I was flipping out about it, and he was like, yeah, you may not be able to get it with this sticker, but if you just wait, there'll be 2 other copies with other stickers. So if you just care about the pop, don't stress out about paying $150 for a sticker. Just wait, and you'll probably get it for like 30 or 40 without a sticker later. I was like, oh, that's way better. That doesn't stress me out. But when you're playing this game and you're watching people, it's just a matter of time. More and more Kickstarters are being put into Scout or others coming in. If you can get these earlier versions, and especially for some of these rarer copies, that's going to pay you back in dividends later, right? Tons if you can get these store exclusives or some of these other versions.
It's tricky. I'm not going to pretend that this is extremely hard. There's the scene in Moneyball where they're speaking to Chris Pratt's character, and one of the guys says, "Oh, it's easy to play first base," and the other guy is like, "It's super hard to play first base."
Right.
It is difficult comic book investing, and there are a lot of projects. But also, if you back 30 comic projects and get an exclusive with all 30 of those, statistically, at least one of them is going to be a success at some point. Now, maybe all 30 of them will be, but at least statistically, one of them will be.
I would even actually say, so if you grabbed 30 Kickstarter comics, one of them will probably be what you say, a hit at another company, but 4 of them, their writer or artist will go on to something bigger, and you're going to get an earlier work, which may not have the same resale value, but will have a better investment. So you're going to do okay.
It's also a very new field.
Right, sure.
I'm in this field, for those who don't know, I'm building the comic book investing class, and I do interviews with people in this sector every week. So this sector is brand new. Right. And even I don't know where it's going, and me and a bunch of other people are monitoring it, and we are also trying to say, hey, where's it going? Because there is no formula for this before.
Sure.
So with everything that's going on, obviously I don't disagree with certain components of that, but it's also very, very, very new. And I have to be completely honest about it. And so you are taking a bit more of a risk.
Yeah, well, and it's, and how do you figure that out, right? So we talked about it. I just realized that I was sitting next to it. So this is my Voodoo Nations folder. So everybody who knows this is a hard thing. Like, this is for one. So I've got all the covers for issue 1. So these are the standard, but this is where it gets tricky, This is one you didn't see on the Kickstarter. That was a Famous Faces exclusive. This is the Kingdom of Comics. This is a Virgin from the Collective. This is the stuff. An investor group, one of the things I think, when I think about that is this is a home edition that we did. This is the 9.9 one that everyone was hunting. You can't see it because of the glare. Let me check it out. I don't care about these staying mint, see?
Right.
I mean, that's a beautiful cover. That's why people are after it.
So it's just a very tricky section right now. And the Kickstarter side of this is brand new. And that's why a lot of people, and including myself, are watching it as a comic investor. But we are not fully diving in until it goes a certain way. And I'm dabbling a little bit in it. But obviously, as it goes, for those who are super interested, it's going to be very interesting. And also, it's tricky on what project is going to do what. And also licensing and a variety of other people and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's beyond complicated. And what I say is that if you've never invested in comics before, go nice and slow in everything you do. Where you shouldn't be spending $500 on a comic on Kickstarter right off the bat. But $25, it's not a bad move.
Yeah, well, one of the things to note too, that I give a warning if you're an investor, people can fake numbers on Kickstarter, so you got to be careful. So someone could say that, oh, I raised 10 grand, but you can track that and find out that was from one guy. They boosted up an extra 3 grand. Odds are one person didn't give them 3 grand, so they were fluffing their numbers. And it's hard to figure that out just by looking at the Kickstarter. You got to look at other metrics to figure that out. And that's important because people think, because they're stupid, that if I get my numbers really high, that's what's going to affect scout or anything like that. Like they don't know that, hey, you can fluff those numbers.
It even goes further on a lot of things. People on Facebook boost their podcast numbers.
You're right, sure.
I can go right now after this interview and spend 10 grand and have 100,000 people look at this interview. That doesn't mean that 100,000 people looked at this interview. What it means is that I paid for 100,000 people to look at this interview, but you don't know if all of a sudden I just did the greatest interview in the world or not. It's very, very interesting in that regard, where numbers can obviously be modified and fluffed out and across the board on everything. And so what I say also is that if a project looks shitty, and no offense to anybody,
right, sure,
and it's doing really well, there's something that's not right, unless it's just an anomaly in the circumstance. So and those happen every once in a while, but also, if something doesn't look right based on the project, and somebody has 3 Kickstarters they started in 3 different projects and they're doing $30,000, either they have a brilliant idea, they're good at marketing, or their numbers are fluffed out. And you can figure out which it is really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's streams that I go on where I look at their numbers and the numbers that they claim they have, but then I see that they put out a Kickstarter later on and they're not even getting a 0.1% return on the viewers. So that means it's not true, right? When I'm on a podcast, I know what I'm going to get based on their views, based on all that stuff. And some might just do for fun, but that's something for creators on the creative side. When you're on these stuff, do your due diligence of whether or not you should be on that program. It's okay to do one that doesn't have a lot of views. But if you have someone who claims they have tons of views, tons of stuff, but you never see anybody increase, you went on it and your numbers didn't increase, it's not because your project is crap, it's because they lied about their numbers. They fix their numbers because you can fake numbers.
It's a big problem right now in self-help. It's and it's across the board in anything. And I know 15 ways how to fake numbers on Kickstarter, and I've never run one. And if I know how to do it, and you're a Kickstarter creator and you don't know how to do it, that's a problem. Right. And you shouldn't do it because you will be found out. It's just one of those things. But obviously, we're so off target. This is the most interesting interview we've done out of so far, or four, I should say. We covered a lot of stuff, but obviously, you were just at a con as well, and I do want to talk about that. Yeah. Because you were at the Scout booth, and I know the Scout was selling a bunch of stuff, and obviously that con was down in Florida. So what was that scene like? Because I am curious.
It was interesting. So that con normally brings in about 20,000 people. I would say it brought close to 8 for this, so it was obviously lower. But 8 is better than what you'd normally get, what you're getting right now. So 8 is not anything to snuff at. But you can really feel it, especially day 3 and 4. Or no, just day 3. You could really see there's no new people really coming in. There's a very few. It's more VIPs who just want to get the most of their 3-day pass. Buyers were quick. They kind of knew what they were looking for. Like day 1 was the Scout day. They came in. For me and the Scout guys, where they bought our exclusives and then we never saw them again. And Saturday and Sunday was more just selling trades of Cthulhu Invades Oz or trade stuff. We didn't have very many.
So to talk about that, because I'm obviously interested in a little bit of market research, but also relevance, where a lot of cons are about to happen. And I think a lot of people now have a list of what they want. They know what they want. They know what price they want to pay for it. And they're an educated, buyer at this point. I'm very educated on what I buy and what price I should be paying for things. And obviously I have the background and all that knowledge, but even still, do you think that's going to be sort of the new norm for a while as far as selling?
Oh, I mean, it was ridiculous. The prices that people had, let's just go. You're an educated guy. Giant Size X-Men number 1, 1.0. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but
how much you think it was going for at the con?
probably like a 1.0. Oh man, I'm out of the loop on X-Men. I know what Hulk 181 goes for.
Sure. Well, so it was going for $2,000.
I was yeah.
That's Punisher's first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 4.0 was also $2,000. Those numbers aren't right. Those numbers don't match up.
I could tell you what a Hulk 4.0 is going for next Sunday on somebody's show. It's going for about $5,500 to $6,000.
Right. So the numbers aren't crazy because you have to understand that a lot of these vendors have held on to these things longer. So they up the sticker price because they need to make money. They're a year out of making money because they use cons to make money. So I think you're going to see that, and I think that's going to be a little bit of a problem. I think that was a big problem.
I've been talking about this for a long time, where the economic position is going to be complicated, and also I don't know who has $2,000 around right now. I know that I don't have $2,000 around. I don't have. I might be going to a con in September, and I would normally come in with about $1,200 to a con, which is
right.
amount. I'm going to be coming in with $300. That's a 75% less position because my economics are tighter, and also my business plan is very, very different at the moment. And going on, I have a lot of merch that I'm selling, and I'm selling $600-700 a month on eBay right now, which is great going, and that has been slowly increasing. Last January I sold $200 a month. So obviously, but I'm moving $50 books. I'm not moving $2,000 books, and there's a reason why I'm doing that. So obviously, I sort of found a niche. But yeah, I think there's going to be an economic issue coming, and I also think that with hyperinflation around the corner, eBay 1099K is coming. There's going to be and 1099K is coming collectively. It's going to be very interesting, And if you don't know what that is, that's a whole different discussion on that. I don't want to get into that too much here, but obviously, it must still be nice though that things are selling quick though at the same time.
Yeah, I did really well. I made close to $1,000 after my stuff, which is great. That's really good for the amount of people there. That shows that people were really interested. And as I bet you can guess, Cthulhu Invades Oz sold like hotcakes. Everybody who saw it, if you saw it and you had the cash, you got it. Right? It was a good seller. But I noticed that cons, people were very stingy with what they were going on. Even the $5, hey, try this out. That was hard for people. Getting that $5 out of them was really, really hard. And I think we're going to see that. I think big ticket items are always going to be big ticket items, but I think people are going to be with their list, buying what they need. And I don't think they're going to do a lot of hunting for keys. I think they're just going to get whatever's on their list and get out because they don't want to be, they don't want to run the risk in, the buyer. It's a buyer's market. People are selling all over the place because people need cash. So it's way better to go to eBay.
I mean, I'm killing it on eBay. I have 45% market markups and profit right now on eBay on average with my Pop Funkos, with my comics, but I'm also dealing with a very different customer base where I'm dealing in exclusives. I'm dealing with limited print runs where the demand is there. And I just sold a Star Wars book by Zenescope for real premium dollar. And I know because it's a 250 print run. There's not 251 of those books, and that's been my business model from day one. And so obviously it's going to be very interesting what's going to happen. And this is my area. So obviously my bet has paid off in a lot of ways, and I have a lot of merch that's coming in the next week and a half. That's super exclusive for a reason. And I'm looking forward to making my 40% on it. And so I'm very excited for that. But that's off topic with Voodoo. Obviously, I want to give you a chance to promote Voodoo Nations. A lot of stuff's coming. And it's going to be fascinating where RJ and Brent go, and Bishop Lucas is coming back because that's what we all want. So where can people find the Kickstarter? You're almost funded.
So yeah, we're almost funded. If you go to Voodoo Nations, just search it Kickstarter. I don't have a funky link this time. I normally do, but I didn't create it because
I think I can put the link up in the description.
Okay. But yeah, find it there, back it. You just need a little bit more help to get where we need to go. But yeah, it's live. We have a lot of exclusives. We still have a few more of the coasters that I shared earlier. So this coaster right here, the first 75 backers get that. But remember, it's physical backers. So even though we're at 115 backers, not all of them are physical. We have a lot of digital backers from England and stuff like that. So I think there's probably about 5 or 6 left of those. So you're going to want to jump on now if you want to get that. And that goes with everyone got it on Voodoo 1. You got the thing, and it's a set of all 4 Voodoo priests because there's 4 in the series. So you want to get that, get it going. We're going to add some new pledge levels probably later in the week, so keep checking back if you've backed it. But yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I'm really excited about it. I love being on the show. I love the amount of effort you put on to read the books and to ask those hard questions.
I reread it.
Oh, nice. Look at you.
I reread it and I bought it on Comixology because I couldn't find the first copy you sent me, and I was happy to do so.
Nice. So I got an extra $2 on Comixology. Mad money, mad money.
So obviously, I read the book, and I'm very excited to read the book. And obviously, there's a lot of cool stuff that's in that book, and it looks really good on an iPad, I gotta say. And I've been saying this all throughout is you got to support indie. Obviously, one of the things that you have to do now is you have to support indie, and that means backing Kickstarters. Whether you're backing digital, you're backing a physical, if you're backing a $12 position, and you can afford it, of course, because I understand COVID has wrecked people financially. Right. Believe me, my assets have been shored up, so I'm with everybody on this. But if you can afford to back it, you should be backing it physically, because that's what really matters right now with creators. But if you're in a circumstance where times are tough, you should absolutely be signing up for email lists. You should be signing up and following people on social media and a variety of other entities, because that does matter as well. And it is a big deal to be on some of these email lists. Follow them on Twitter, follow them on Facebook, check out a bunch of their Facebook stuff, join a comic group, you see the Kickstarter, share the Kickstarter with somebody, because it does make a difference. And it is super, super important to do that right now. And I cannot emphasize that enough, because it is, you might not think it makes a difference, but it absolutely does. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word, floor. Anything else you want to promote and anything else you want to do, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, everything you said is right. We need your support. And really, if you're watching this and you were interested in any of the investing stuff, one of the things I want to tell you is, Penguin, Marvel's moving to Penguin. DC's Luna, Diamond's going to be in a tough position. I wouldn't be surprised if Kickstarter is where you find your indie books very, very soon. It's going to be harder and harder to find these non-image books, so think about that and what that looks like, and pick your investments wisely. Voodoo Nations, I think, is a good investment, and I'm not saying that just because of me, but I'm starting to build a name. I was invited to the Scout booth. I do really well. I have a great presence. I get invited to a lot of places. And I think that picking this book up is a good fit. And it's my second series. Issue 3 is going to be out in no time. The book is done. If you look at the Kickstarter, unlike other books, you're going to get this in a month. So a month after I get the funds, you will get this book, because the book's done and ready to go to the printer. We just need the funds to print it. And you can see that all on the Kickstarter.
Yeah, and I think that is super important. And obviously, you deliver on your Kickstarters, and I'll add that in there. And yeah, it looks good, guys. And if you know Travis's work, obviously, you're going to get your book. And I know that's a big concern for a lot of people. And that's the best praise I can give, is that you always deliver on your books, and you deliver very quickly, and you put a lot of effort into what your books are and the stories you tell. And so I would like to say thank you for being on, because it is super important that people get on. Obviously, I'm excited for Voodoo Nations as a series, where it's going, and everything in between. And so on that note, this is a wrap.